This is the brand new Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty. It's one of a new line of bikes under that Topstone gravel range that has smaller diameter 650B wheels, but bigger tyres and, as you can see, suspension. Now they have kindly sent us some sample bikes so that we can take you through the details. Now, Cannondale have prior form in this department. They put a rocket under our collective backsides back in 2015 when they launched the Slate. Now, at the time, no one really knew what to do with a drop handlebar bike that had 650B wheels and tight and lively geometry and a suspension fork. But with the benefit of hindsight, I think it was probably just ahead of its time, and now it's kind of on its way to becoming something of an icon. Is this then an evolution of the Slate? Well, yeah, but it's made some big leaps.
Like this one, as part of Topstone's gravel range, it now includes e-bikes with 500 watt-hour batteries and a Bosch power unit.
Let's start with this one, shall we? So Cannondale launched the Topstone Carbon in 2019. It made a big impact with its Kingpin system, which gives 30mm of rear suspension. So through some carbon wizardry with the layup and also the addition of a pivot here where the seat stays meet the seat tube, they've been able to engineer in that suspension, but whilst maintaining lateral rigidity. And it's also super light because the only additional hardware is of course that pivot there. Now with a big plush gravel tyre up front, you do get quite a bit of comfort even with a rigid fork. But to cater for the widest spectrum of gravel riders and riding styles, Cannondale have created this additional option of the Lefty Oliver front suspension. Now you might be wondering, what's a Lefty? Well, it's Cannondale's own suspension design that's been around for 20 years now, and I think it's fair to say that it causes as much of a stir today as it did back then, because as you can clearly see, there is only one fork leg on the right. Left. Sorry, too bad a joke? Probably. Now then, why have Cannondale done it this way? Well, instead of a traditional round tube that slides over another one, like you might get in a conventional double stanchion fork, Cannondale have used a square profile delta cage with needle bearings, okay? So they say that this keeps the suspension working smoothly, even when the fork is under additional loads like braking and so forth. Now, the technology is tried and tested, not just in 20 years of Lefties, but also apparently because square profile and needle bearings are used in the landing gear of aircrafts. Yep, that was a fact I didn't know until very recently. Now then, is it stiff, I hear you ask, when you get rid of one fork leg? Well, interestingly, Cannondale actually said that they felt the previous generation Lefty Oliver on the Slate was too stiff. And so in addition to the suspension here, they've also built in a fraction more compliance to help the bike track smoothly through rough terrain. It's got 30mm of suspension travel, but Cannondale are really keen to stress that this is not just a scaled down mountain bike fork. This has been designed from the ground up with the specific needs of gravel riding and around this amount of suspension travel. There is a lockout lever, which when you flip it, turns the fork from a suspension fork into a fully rigid fork, if you so wish. But even when it's open, it's been designed to minimize bobbing when you're riding. So why 30mm then? Well, Cannondale say that they think that this is the optimal blend of efficiency and capability, but that crucially, if the fork was any longer, you would then start to affect the geometry of the bike, specifically raising the handlebars up. Now, geometry nerds will be very pleased to note that the distance between the axle at the front wheel and the crown of the fork is the same on this suspension Lefty Oliver as it is on the rigid fork. So what this means is that Cannondale haven't had to sacrifice their finely tuned geometry and end up with a really high front end that might mean that some of us would struggle to find our optimal and comfortable positions on the bike. Now, part of the reason they've been able to do that is by using these 650B wheels. So even with those big wide 47mm tyres on there, the actual overall diameter of the wheel is still only about equivalent to a 700C wheel with a 32mm wide tyre. So they simply haven't had to factor in quite so much clearance. Now, while 30mm of suspension might not sound like that much to mountain bikers, Cannondale reckon that with that and those nice big volume tyres, that this Topstone would comfortably overlap with the kind of terrain that you would consider taking a mountain bike on. But crucially, you've got that same fast, efficient feeling position that makes road and simple trails feel so much fun. Speaking of which, over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Si. Check out what I got here. An all-new E version of the Topstone. Same as yours, just this puppy's got a lot more juice. All right, let's really go now. Now, Cannondale has been in the gravel game since the beginning, even before it started. If you guys want to know what's growing faster than gravel right now? E-bikes. And this is what happens when you combine those two and make it into one. Claimed to be the most off-road capable e-road bike, the Topstone Carbon Lefty boasts the same Lefty suspension fork as its analog counterpart. This one has a tailored Kingpin setup, and to bring it to a new crowd, has the Bosch motor and 500-hour-watt batteries to go with it. If you guys can tell, I'm going super fast right now. That's because in the US, this baby can go to 28 miles per hour. Ow! Off-road, that is super fast. Now in the UK and in parts of Europe, the bike's regulated to 25k per hour, but that's still plenty of horsepower to get you up those big climbs and get you into just enough trouble, so watch yourselves. The bike has a range of 80 to 120k depending on how much you weigh, how much stuff you want to put on your bike, and all those different factors. The bike, when it finally does run out of battery, has a 3 to 4 hour charge time. All right, guys, there are a ton of mosquitoes out here, so I'm gonna be dancing a little bit when I do this. These are the two bikes that have tons of different options of spec to them. First, you've got two main model differences. You've got the Neo and you've got the Neo Lefty. Now, what the Neo gives you is a fast rolling 700C with a 37C tire. It's also got a fully rigid carbon fork up front. Now, Cannondale has spec'd this with a slew of different Shimano GRX group set options, and this bike, they told us, is aimed at riders who are more likely to take the road and shuttle them over to the gnarly, crazy gravel stuff. Then you've got the Neo Lefty version here, and you guessed it, that comes with the single arm up front that Si talked you guys through before. It's kept super fun with the suspension fork, the 650B wheel set, and the 42C tires. Cannondale has spec'd SRAM's Axis X01 like you see here, or you can get Shimano's GRX group sets on this bike as well. So it truly does come down to personal preference of group set, wheel size, suspension, no suspension, but the options are there. Now, these options are the exact same on the non-e-bike versions as well. 700C with the 2X with the rigid fork, or 650 with the 1X and the Lefty like Si and I have been tearing it up on today. It also has an integrated wheel sensor which can log on to the Cannondale app and let you know if your bike needs a tune-up or even how much carbon that you're not using when you decide to ride your e-bike versus, say, drive your car. And last but not least, these bikes come, yes, as I kill these mosquitoes off, with dropper post compatibility, you guys, graying the lines between mountain bike and gravel even further. Get out of here, there's so many bugs. Speaking of the dirt bikers, here they come. Yo, get it, get it. Yo, yo, wrap. All right, let's see if we can keep up with them. On the Neo.
So there you have it, a very quick look round these 3 new lines that have been added to Cannondale's Topstone gravel range. There is a huge array of choice. It covers the whole gravel spectrum, I think it's fair to say now, but there is actually one choice that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is that the suspension fork, the Lefty Oliver, will be available to buy on its own as an aftermarket option. Now then, let us know in the comments section what you think about these new bikes, and also make sure you give this video a big thumbs up.